Good morning. How are you all this morning? So what'd you think about yesterday? I was pretty excited. I was pretty excited by it. I enjoyed it all. I can't pick a favorite because they were all my favorites. But I have a lot of favorites today too. So I'm looking forward to a day that was every bit as good as yesterday. So I hope you were able to visit some outside with our vendors and sponsors, especially the kids from U of L and UK, to see their innovative work. I was inspired and intrigued by some of that work. Thank you to them and Dr. Storrs. Where is Brian? He's here somewhere. But thank you. And Dale Booth, who also helped coordinate that activity. I also have to take some time to thank the conference committee. It takes a village to put this on, and they work about 10 months out of the year pulling all of this together. We have our amazing, amazing conference chair, Amanda Lefevre. Where are you, Amanda? Woohoo! Thank you so much. So from the Department for Environmental Protection, Natalie Bruner, Elizabeth McNulty, Shanna Weber, Stephanie Osterman, Carrie Johnson, Luana Aldridge, and Amber Hawkins. From the Office of Energy Policy, Haley Mullins. From the Secretary's Office, Sandra Gardner, Debbie Gall, and Barry Mayfield. From Natural Resources, Sonia White. And from the Office of Communications, we have Brad Bowman, Kirsten Delamarter, Jesse Traylor, and Robin Hartman. That crew, they will get 2 months off, but during the next 2 months, they'll be planning an employee appreciation event that occurs at Christmas at 300 Sauer Boulevard, and then they'll hit the ground running in January. And next year will be our 50th annual Governor's Conference, so please expect big things. Huge thank you also to Wesley Turner, who assisted with printing, for our emergency response team, for setting up their vehicle for us to tour. If you haven't been out there, it's in the back of the building, and you can go through and they can talk to you a little bit. They have a mobile mass spectrometer, which costs a lot of money, let me tell you, but it's one of 3 or 4 that we have in the cabinet. It's the only one that's portable, so it's worth seeing, so please get out there if you can. And thank you to our crew with the Recycling and Local Assistance Branch, who's always willing and able to help us transport material. We actually bring these chairs from our offices because we like this setup, so thank you to them. And we need to thank our sponsors. Our Commonwealth sponsor and the sponsor for lunch yesterday, Nucor, thank you very much. Our Goldenrod sponsor who provided yesterday's breakfast, which was EDP Renewables. Our Viceroy sponsors supporting our breaks, Kentucky's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, and Deloitte. So as we kick off today, Dr. Brian Storrs is going to lead us as we welcome a panel from the Maysville area to learn about their comprehensive efforts to protect and enhance that community in what will no doubt become a model for other communities. We certainly hope so. We're always excited to learn more about the planned pump storage hydropower facility planned in Bell County, the first hydropower facility built in the U.S. In over 30 years. Rye Development will be here with us sharing news on that front. We have groundbreaking solutions to waste management. We'll hear from pioneers who are finding new value in organic byproducts. Dr. Serenity Wright is here to help us find our lenses and consider new ways of creative thinking, of trust, and of motivation. We'll learn how GIS tools, sorry, haven't had enough coffee this morning. We'll learn how GIS tools are shaping our work in our communities with insight from Sunny Fleming from Esri. And we'll get an in-depth update on nuclear energy to close out our day, and that's going to be an exciting panel. I hope you stay around for that. I hope you found time to network with those in attendance. It's a very, very good cross-section of everybody who's anybody in the energy and environment fields, and we thank you all for coming to this conference. So now I have the distinct pleasure to introduce Mr. David Kane. He's a clean energy developer with EDP Renewables North America. EDP North America was established in 2007 as one of the top 5 largest owners and operators of renewable energy in the United States. Their wind, solar, and energy storage systems power more than 3.2 million homes every year. Headquartered in Houston, Texas, they have 61 wind farms, 26 solar parks, and 8 regional offices across North America. EDP NA has developed more than 12,000 megawatts and operates more than 11,400 megawatts of onshore utility-scale energy projects. Please welcome David Kane.
Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be here at the 49th Annual Governor's Conference on Energy and the Environment. My name is David Kane, and I'm the Director of Development at EDP Renewables North America Distributed Generation. That's a mouthful, so we like to just use EDP. We're proud to be a sponsor of this year's event. When we talk about Kentucky's energy future, the conversation often centers on balance, how to meet the state's growing power needs while preserving affordability, reliability, and the rural character that defines many of the Commonwealth's communities. Distributed generation, small-scale local solar systems on homes, businesses, schools, and farms, has a powerful role to play in that balance. Kentucky has the potential to become a national leader in small-scale solar and reap the benefits if we build the market conditions to let those benefits take root and grow. At EDP, we understand that potential and are proud to be among the first distributed generation developers working in Kentucky, with 8 sites and 44 megawatts under development across the state. These projects will power local communities and businesses and demonstrate how smaller scale solar can deliver tangible, lasting value. Nationally, our team manages 545 active projects across 25 states, delivering 337 megawatts to more than 100 customers, from manufacturers to school districts to municipalities. That broad perspective gives us confidence that Kentucky's distributed generation market is just getting started, and that the lessons we've learned elsewhere can help accelerate clean energy deployment here. Why does distributed generation matter for Kentucky? Because it strengthens what Kentuckians care about most: energy independence, local control, and resilience. When a business puts panels on its warehouse or battery storage on underutilized property, that power doesn't just flow to the grid, it flows into the local economy. It reduces stress on distribution systems, delays or eliminates the need for costly transmission upgrades, creates skilled jobs that stay in the community, and stabilizes volatile energy prices. And this isn't an either-or choice. Distributed generation complements utility-scale renewables and traditional energy assets. Together, they create a diverse, reliable energy mix that helps Kentucky stay strong through market shifts and extreme weather. Kentucky's strength is in its people and its land. Distributed generation empowers both, allowing Kentuckians to produce energy where they live, work, and farm. As we look ahead, expanding access to small-scale solar isn't just about kilowatts. It's about economic choice, local pride, and allowing every community, from Pikeville to Paducah, to share in the benefits of a modern, resilient energy system. Lastly, I want to point out 2 of my EDP colleagues, Adam Davis and Landon Redmond. Please look for us around the conference or at the EDP table if you'd like to talk further about our work here in Kentucky. And now, it's my honor to introduce a panel that will dive deep into a particularly innovative project that is an important part of Kentucky's energy future, led by a fellow energy leader, Rye Development. Please join me in welcoming Vice President of Development, Sandy Slayton, and Vice President of Development, Brianne Wilson. Thank you.
Rye Development is advancing a new generation of pump storage hydropower that will help the U.S. meet our growing energy demand. Pump storage is the world's largest, most common type of energy storage technology. Built to last more than 100 years, pump storage helps ensure that people have energy when they need it the most. Pump storage works like a giant water battery. It consists of two reservoirs at different elevations. When demand for electricity is low, energy is used to pump water from the lower reservoir to the upper reservoir. Then, when demand for electricity is high, water is released from the upper reservoir through a big pipe or a penstock. As the water flows downhill, it spins hydroelectric turbines at the bottom of the penstock to generate on-demand electricity. The water returns to the lower reservoir where the process starts again. Pump storage projects are built to last. The first one, built in the U.S. more than 100 years ago, is still in operation today. Set in Bell County, Kentucky, the Lewis Ridge project represents a new era of jobs and economic growth for southeastern Kentucky. The $1.3 billion energy storage project will bring decades of positive economic benefits to the region. The project will generate more than 2,300 jobs during construction and deliver millions in tax revenue to Bell County once completed. Eastern Kentucky has a strong mining legacy. Many of the same skills used in mining will be required to build the Lewis Ridge project. We will need workers with skills like operating heavy equipment, drilling, blasting, surveying, and project management.
Ashland has owned this property 70, 80 years. It's historically been used for coal mining and timber harvesting. Most of the coal has been mined. This project by Rye Development of pump storage would be a great reuse of that property.
The Lewis Ridge project is not only an investment in the electrical grid, but it's a significant investment in Kentucky's future.
Good morning. I'm Bree Wilson. I'm the Vice President of Development at Rye Development.
And I'm Sandy Slayton. I'm Vice President Environmental at Rye Development.
And we're here to talk about pump storage, and more specifically, the project that we're developing in Bell County, Kentucky. And we have a slide presentation that's going to start here, but I'll tell you a little bit about Rye Development. Rye Development is focused on leading us into the next generation of pump storage hydro. We're paving the way, like David, or I guess it wasn't David, but we haven't built a pump storage project in 30 years, plus 30 years in the United States. They are being built internationally, and they're very important in the grid. But this is looking to be the first pump storage project in the U.S., and when you say that Kentucky's leading the way, they really are. It's been really great working with folks in Kentucky, and they see that vision. Rye has partners in EDF, Energy de France Power Solutions, and Climate Adaptive Infrastructure. And we have a large team that has expertise from licensing and permitting and engineering. We have folks that have built pump storage internationally, and we're really excited to be working on this project here. Talks a little bit about what we do. The first thing you have to do when you're looking for a pump storage project is figure out if the site's going to work. And with your guys' natural topography, it works great because you need about 1,000 feet of elevation. You need space for 2 reservoirs. You need areas where you are close to transmission. You need folks who need the power, folks that can manage it. So there's a lot of great opportunity in Kentucky, especially at the Lewis Ridge site. But we go through from identifying the site to permitting, getting a FERC license, doing the engineering and design, getting the interconnection application in for the interconnection queue, finding folks who want to own and operate, or we could potentially own and operate, all the way through construction and commissioning and operation. Right now, Rye Development has about 15 projects across the country. We are developing pump storage projects. We also have some run-of-river projects that you can see around here as well. And those would be developing hydropower on dams that don't have hydropower already. I'm sure most of you know what pump storage is, but we have to do our little hand gesture for everyone. We joke within Rye that which hand goes on top. So pump storage is long duration storage. So we're looking at 8, 10, 12, up to 24 hours of storage. And you have this potential energy in your upper reservoir, so when you need the power, you can just turn it on. Within under 2 minutes, you get power. And it runs down and flows when you need it. And then when you have excess energy on your grid, so say you've got your solar comes online, your wind comes online, or you have excess from your base load fossil plants, then you can pump that back up. And it's really great because sometimes, I know in the Northwest, people will pay you to take their energy in those times. So it's an opportunity to operate when you need and pump when you have excess. One of the things that we hear a lot is extreme weather. So I know we had an event here 4 years ago. The event in Texas. There's been events across the country. I'm sure you've heard about where there's large outages, and those are typically happening because of the inability to have black start capability, which pump storage does, or you've got we learned about the outage in Portugal and Spain last week at a conference we were at, and it was solar and wind, a quick shift in that happening and not being able to handle that variation in the grid. And what pump storage can do is it can adjust on demand, basically. So if you have any energy that you need to put somewhere, you have the ability to do that with your pump storage project very quickly and prevent those outages. And then if you do have an outage, you have this potential energy again that you can just run and have black start capability to get the lights back on. And as you know, there's a large demand in the U.S. We're growing in need. We're growing because of AI data centers, just general need, electrification. We want to bring manufacturing back stateside. There's another big potential growth in need for power. And so we need to keep up with that with all kinds of different solutions. And pump storage really does integrate really well. And as we're looking at fossil fuel retirements, I say that with a little hesitation here, because what we would really like to do is help supplement if you have to take a plant off, but also help extend the life of those plants. So the way that nuclear, coal, the big gas turbines work is if they're running at a steady state where they don't have to vary, it extends their life significantly. And if you bring a pump storage project in to absorb any shifts, then you get to extend the life of those units by years sometimes. And then again, grid reliability that I talked about at the beginning. You can adjust to shifts in the grid, in the system. Right now, pump storage is 93% of storage in the country, or not the country, in the world. It is the longest, the most reliable. Hydropower projects last 100+ years. We have hydropower plants, with maintenance and some upgrades or rehabilitation that are going to last hundreds of years. So this is a long-term investment. It's proven. We have it all over, and it's shown that, which is really nice. So it is. When we say innovative, I think it's innovative to integrate it into the grid, but it really is a proven product, I guess. And then it has low emissions. I mean, we were looking at, looking to the future and making sure that we're implementing things that are going to push us forward to reduce emissions, and it is one of those solutions. So one of the things that folks look at, right? You're looking at, you need some storage. So right now, I don't know how far out you plan. Some folks plan 30, 20 years. Some folks need to have a solution within a year or two, and they look to cost, and they look to when they're going to get paid back, and batteries have typically been implemented. And there's definitely a use for those. There's a use for batteries. It's kind of a different product because you're looking at storage for 2 to 4 hours versus storage for 8 to 24 hours. So there's a need for both in our system. But if you're looking at how this pans out over time, it is a lower cost long term. You wouldn't have to continually replace batteries. After, I think it's a 15 to 20 year replacement. I'm not an expert on batteries, so I shouldn't say anything. But, we have supply chain independence. You build it and you have water. I mean, that's what you're using. You're taking the water and you're pumping it through. And just, it's, the maintenance the maintenance on a project, is something that you would do now. We'll be looking towards more predictive maintenance or more instead of time-based maintenance. So the industry is shifting a little bit that way too. So I don't want to get into that. That'd be a whole spiel on a different thing. But the maintenance on these is not extreme. I'm going to hand it over to Sandy to talk about Lewis Ridge.
Thanks, Bree.
Mm-hmm.
So the Lewis Ridge project, we saw a little bit about in the video that played earlier. 266 megawatts of a closed-loop pump storage project in Bell County. It's sited on lands that were used for mining, and really there's no mining left to do in those lands. So this is an incredibly sort of innovative new economic use of those lands. There's been surface mining in the upper reservoir area. There's 5 coal seams under the area that will be used for the upper reservoir. And then in the lower reservoir area, we have high wall mining and some underground mining. So there's a lot that's happened in those areas, which makes it complicated from a geotechnical perspective, but also makes it a really interesting spot to be able to find a new energy-related economic development in this area. So we are looking at a 50% investment tax credit that did sustain through the new bill. So that's great. We're really excited to have federal support for hydropower. In addition to that, in 2024, we were selected for an $81 million grant from Department of Energy from the Clean Energy on Mine Lands program, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. Also on the federal front, we filed our final license application with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission in June of 2025, which I will talk more about. And I am in charge of our licensing and permitting and compliance. So if anybody wants to talk licensing and permitting compliance, I can talk your ear off, but I'll try and keep it short here. We've also established some really great partnerships with local economic development organizations, including SOAR. They've been a really incredible partner. We're working on career training programs and hopefully getting the message out to everyone who we can possibly talk to about sort of how we envision this project in benefiting Bell County and southeastern Kentucky, and how we can try and continue to collaborate to make it sort of the best it can be for eastern Kentucky. So the project is a $1.3 billion of investment in southeastern Kentucky, which is big. Over 2,300 family wage jobs will be required for the 4-year construction period. So when you think about Bell County, that sounds like an incredible number of people. We're talking about up to 700 individuals on site at any given time. So not 2,300 at one point, but 700 at any time, and 2,300 over the course of the 4-year period. And then another 40 plus permanent jobs after the project is operational, and those are long-term, family wage jobs. The other fact that's really an impressive number, and I think makes a really big impact, is that our annual tax liability for the project will be $16.5 million. We at least have estimated during operations, and if you compare that to Bell County's current annual budget of $13 million, it's a pretty big benefit to the local economy. We were thrilled to be able to receive a $81 million cost share from Department of Energy for the Clean Energy on Mine Lands program. We were awarded this in 2024. The total award is $81 million. Phase one of that award is $24 million. Well, sorry, the total project cost in phase one is $24 million. The award itself is $12 million, so half of that amount. That phase one work includes sort of all the things we're talking about now: budgeting, scheduling, and early engineering work, permitting work, field work, and then workforce planning, and all of the things that it takes to sort of get a project launched. That's about an 18-month timeline that should end around the end of the year, and we'll move into a phase two. But the phase two activities are largely similar to what we're doing now in phase one. So this timeline is potentially not as interesting as it actually is to us, because one of the challenges with getting pump storage online in the US, and one of the reasons that we haven't had a project developed in so long, is that it's a really, really lengthy permitting process there. So they're expensive, permitting takes forever, and they're complicated because you have to bring all these things together. So one of the reasons that we think that Rye has been innovative is that we've been able to compress our timeline, which will allow the project to come on faster. But when you're looking at something that's 15 years out, it's hard to plan for a project that's 15 years away. So we've compressed the timeline into something that's a lot more reasonable, allows utilities to plan, allows investors to plan, and allows the local communities to plan, and really see what this will look like. So we started this whole process in 2022. We got a preliminary permit from FERC, which basically says, okay, yeah, you can look at developing a project. And then we filed a pre-application document with FERC, which is basically a library report of all of the information that's publicly available on the site to describe the environment that the project will be developed in, and then something similar to maybe a draft of our project engineering, where we think the project is going to be on the landscape. From there, we had a public meeting in January of 2023, got a lot of people together, got a lot of really great comments and conversations going, developed some really great relationships with folks that we'll be interacting with for a variety of different reasons on the project. We started field studies, some of which we've completed and some of which are at a point where we can make some analysis, but we'll continue until construction because we just want to keep collecting data. But during 2023 and 2024, we did field studies. We received our grant award from Department of Energy, and we submitted a draft license application to FERC. And what that is a description of what we really think the engineering will look like for the project, and then an environmental document that is similar to what you would see in a NEPA document that describes all of the potential resources that are on the property we'll be developing, and then all of the potential impacts we think the project could have, and then mitigation if necessary for any kind of impacts. So in 2025, in June, we submitted our final license application to FERC, and we are working on our 30% design. Like I said, we'll be doing field studies until we develop the project, but we've continued our field studies and completed some that actually had an endpoint, and we're working on state and local permitting. So we'll be submitting our now I can't think of what it's called, but the pre-application for the 401 this year, and we'll be working next year on all of our state and local permitting. The way we have compressed the schedule the most significantly is that while we're doing this, we'll also be working with FERC Dam Safety on engineering. So we had submitted this original application to FERC, which gives us a license to construct and operate the project. Normally, the way it has worked in the past is that a licensee gets a license, and then they say, okay, now I'm going to work with FERC Dam Safety, and I'm going to do all the rest of my engineering, and that process takes a couple of years. So we're doing that concurrent with our license. We already have a board of consultants established with FERC, and we're starting our FERC Dam Safety review now. We'll have our first meeting with our board of consultants in January, and they will continue to work with us and work with FERC through license issuance and beyond. So FERC will do NEPA, the Board of Consultants will look at dam safety, and by 2027, we expect to have a construction and operational license issued, and we also expect to complete the FERC dam safety review, which is, very rigorous. After, we'll have some pre-construction activities that we'll need to do. We expect to start construction in 2028, and then we're looking at a 4-year construction window, so we expect to start commercial operation 2031, 2032. It's a long time to talk about a schedule, but this is really exciting for us because we're moving things a lot faster. And like Bree said, we haven't developed a pump storage project in a long time, so it's a really big deal to get this moving faster. So I do have the questions. If anybody has questions, I do have the iPad where they'll pop up, but also we could take some questions too. If anybody has any. The adjacent, so you can answer too. The adjacent mining we won't interact with particularly, so that has been sort of separate, and we've tried to make a point that that's really separate. One of the things that's beneficial though is that the roads, the access roads to the project were already there, and we were able to work with them to improve the roads to the project. So that's been good. Overall, I think that it's basically beneficial, for both us and the mining company, and we're hoping that they'll be able to provide us some workers during construction, which is another potential benefit, that there's already workers that are familiar on site. So we have been working, so the question was to talk a little bit more about the workforce that we're expecting and how we expect to get the workforce on site. We're talking about 2,300 workers sort of during construction, but that's workers per year. So when you look at any given point, we're looking at about 700, up to 700 people on site at any given point. We have done some preliminary analysis, and we think that there is a workforce available, well, obviously not sitting in Bell County today, but in the greater region that can do a lot of the things that we need. Because if you look at the skills that are needed for coal mining and the skills that are needed for digging a reservoir, a lot of the skill sets are very similar, and a lot of the equipment needs are very similar. We're working with SOAR to help make sure that we find workers in the region. We're going to do our absolute best to source workers from the southeastern Kentucky region as best we can.
Yeah, and we're going to be excavating 11 million cubic yards. So, hope it's a huge job, but if we could find folks locally that could do that, that would be great. And then something we'll need to think about is how are we going to support that with infrastructure? Where are folks going to stay? So that'll be something that we'll be looking at over the next year as well. Yeah.
So it's in Virginia. So the question is that there's a site that looks at the map. Kentucky and Virginia are really close together, and those dots end up taking up like a giant corner of the state. So they look like they're really close together. They are really close together, but the other site that we're looking at is in Virginia, in Wise County. It's a similar setting, but it would be for a different utility, totally different project, and that's in its absolute infancy. We're back in like where we were in 2022 with Lewis Ridge.
Yes? Same, so it'll be one unit that would do both, fixed speed. But But yeah, we won't separate and have 4 units, one doing pumping, one doing generating. That was your question? Okay. I love another engineer in the room. Yeah? Nope. Nope, we'll take water from, we'll get a permit and we'll take water from the, I'm not just gonna take it. We'll get permission, but we'll take it from the Cumberland for initial fill and we just pump it up and, you know, once that initial fill is done, we would only need to recharge based on losses, so the reservoirs will be lined and typically it's evaporative losses that happen. And so you'll take that water and it'll be reused for years. And we think we'll need to refill or recharge, not fully, but which is you might know the number off the top of your head, I can't remember, but a very small amount compared to the initial fill that we would have to top it off, basically. Every two years we're looking at, but it's pretty watertight. Oh, hi. Oh.
If you could find us one, that would be great. We've tried. In terms of actually abandoned, so these are SMACRA, these are permitted. These are permitted, bonded lands that we're looking at here. We tried to look for, abandoned, like pre-SMACRA, abandoned mine lands, but we haven't been able to actually find a site like that. So if there's another site somewhere with some abandoned mine lands that have, about 1,000 feet of head between them and would be a good pump storage project, we would love to talk to you, but we haven't found anything sort of like that. We also need about 40 or 50 acres, per reservoir, which we haven't found in the specific abandoned mine land category.
We'll do one more and then I think we're out of time. Can I get you the exact number later? We have it, I just would say the wrong number and that would be. Well, no. Typically, if you're running it for an 8-hour block, you would just have the 266 over 8 hours, but that doesn't really functionally sit in the system. So how folks would look to operate it would be to shave off the peaks, morning and afternoon. And I think you've got a 3-hour peak in the morning and maybe a little bit shorter one in the afternoon, evening when folks get home from work. So that wouldn't necessarily be ran as one big block. All right. Thank you for having us. We were really excited to be here, and we were really excited about this project.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandy and Brianne. We appreciate you being here and talking about this exciting project and all the possibilities. So thank you for spending some time with us this morning. And we are about to transition to our next topic, and still in the energy realm, but we're going to be talking about organic byproducts and their potential for biofuels. So sustainable fuels and hopefully new sustainable economy opportunities as well. So as we get mic'd up, we'll take the stage here in just a moment, but I'll offer you a couple conference fun facts in the meantime. Did you know that some of the mics that we're using today are actually used by the Grammys? But today we will have no singing, but we're high end here at the Governor's Conference. And also our energy use this year is a quarter of what it typically is because of new lights. So we're also energy efficient. So yay us. And yay ITA for outfitting us well today. So, all right. Welcome, Haley.
Maybe first. Whoop.
All right, good morning, everyone.
Hello. Thank you again for attending day 2 of the conference. I'm really excited about this panel that we put together for you all. It's on the topic of waste to energy. This topic really is about turning challenges into opportunities. Waste can often be considered a challenge in many communities, whether from municipal or industry or otherwise. And we've got 4 speakers up here with us today. We've got Eduardo Santillan, Associate Director and Associate Professor at the University of Kentucky. We have Auden Kaler, Senior Vice President of WSP. Matt Yarger, U.S. General Manager for Grissom Renewable Energy, and Derek Smith, Environmental Superintendent at Domtar's Hawesville Mill. We'll begin our discussion today with sustainable aviation fuel. The Office of Energy Policy has been extremely grateful to have a relationship with CAER as well as WSP to look into this topic and see how Kentucky can play a role in this emerging market. So I'm going to go ahead and pass over our attention to Eduardo to talk about a feasibility study that the Office of Energy Policy has been working on with CAER. So
There's a slide deck to this, so hopefully I'll be able to control it. Perfect. Good morning, everyone. This brief presentation will focus on a project that was funded by the Kentucky Energy and Environment Cabinet, Office of Energy Policy, and ties into the governor's strategy on fuel diversification. In this project, the University of Kentucky Center for Applied Energy Research performed a risk assessment of representative feedstocks to produce sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF, in Kentucky through the HEFA pathway. And therefore, it may be wise to start with an overview of SAF production pathways. Worked. There are currently 11 SAF production pathways approved by the American Society for Testing and Materials, or ASTM. These pathways produce SAF that can be blended with conventional jet fuel up to a maximum blend limit prior to use. However, the vast majority of SAF is currently produced by a handful of pathways. And in fact, the International Air Transport Association estimated that in 2022, 84% of SAF was produced by a single pathway called HEFA. HEFA stands for hydroprocessed esters and fatty acids. Esters and fatty acids are the compounds that constitute fats, oils, and greases. When these are hydroprocessed, they are exposed to hydrogen in the presence of a catalyst that ultimately afford hydrocarbon fuels, like SAF. Yes, it worked. I'm struggling with the... So, the feedstocks are related to the production pathway that they are employing. And so, for instance, Fischer-Tropsch requires syngas, which is a mixture of carbon monoxide and hydrogen. That can be produced through gasification from coal, biomass, natural gas, you name it. Fog, or fats, oils, and greases, not only can be used by HEFA, but could also be used by other methods, such as co-processing. In co-processing, 5% of fog is mixed with a fossil stream and upgraded to SAF in a conventional refinery. Most of the technologies to produce SAF are based on fog, and therefore our study focused on these feedstocks. We focused on 4 representative feedstocks. 2 are waste streams, used cooking oil or yellow grease and brown grease. But we also focused on 2 other feedstocks, namely soybean oil and corn oil. These are one of the most important agricultural commodities in the state. Just to put things into perspective, as a function of SAF production, projected 2030 jet fuel usage in Kentucky will be 1.2 billion gallons. And the Kentucky SAF Coalition has set up a goal for, in the same year, 2030, for usage to be 10%. That's 120 million gallons. And therefore, Kentucky's fog production can help reach this goal using HEFA technology. Now, not all fog can be directed to SAF production. We do eat a lot of this stuff, which also has other uses. And so that highlights the need to expand the roster of fog and other feedstocks to produce SAF through HEFA and other technologies. We performed this risk assessment based on the U.S. Department of Energy framework for biomass supply chain risk standards. This is a framework developed by DOE to inform investment and de-risk folks that are interested in expanding the whole potential of the bioeconomy. So we looked at 6 different risk categories. One was supplier risk, there was competitor risk, supply chain risk, feedstock quality risk, feedstock scale-up risk, and internal organizational risk. We found that risk concentrated on supplier risk and supply chain risk. And you can see in the table that for yellow grease and brown grease, both supply risk and supply chain risk was high. For soybean oil, supplier risk and supply chain risk were high and medium, respectively. But for corn oil, supplier risk was medium and supply chain risk was low, and that made corn oil the lowest risk feedstock overall. Now, this project also had a GIS component. We'll hear more about that later on. But for this particular project, we just wanted to determine how much of this feedstock is available and where is it located. One of the most interesting findings, as you can see in the slide, is that the highest density for production of these feedstocks is in close proximity to the Ohio River. And this creates a pretty interesting opportunity because the Kentucky 2 largest airports are also located in close proximity to the river. So one could envision locating a SAF production facility nearby, and this would allow for feedstock to be transported to that facility and for SAF to be distributed back to the airports using this waterway and allow for efficiencies. And with that, I would like to thank once again the Cabinet for funding this work and you for your kind attention.
Yeah. Thank you, Eduardo. The findings of the study have been really interesting. In fact, we recently shared a blog post you may have seen, and the story has been picked up by some global biofuel news outlets. So this is really exciting work. And Eduardo, I'd love if you could share just a little bit more about the waste streams that you and your team at UK are studying, and how your work has helped advance the technologies that not only produce sustainable aviation fuel, but also renewable diesel.
Totally. I also have some slides for this. I like. So we focused on fog, as I mentioned, but we give preferential treatment, if you will, to waste. That is because waste wouldn't compete with the food supply, as it would be the case with corn oil or soybean oil, etc. So among these waste feedstocks, we particularly focus on brown grease. That is because not only the entirety of this feedstock is currently landfilled or incinerated, but it is also not compatible with existing HEFA technology. And therefore, if we manage to prove that our more innovative technology is compatible with these feedstock, it would be pretty much compatible with anything else. Haley mentioned that we do focus on renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel. And so hopefully I won't give anybody nausea when I show this. Chemistry, barf. Suffice it to say that most hydrotreating technology currently is based on the hydrodeoxygenation reaction. That has several disadvantages. You can just look away from the chemical equations. Don't mean to, send you back to bad memories of college. We focus on other reactions, right? In the table in the slide, you can see that the drawbacks from current technology we are trying to address through alternative technology. So that's the take-home message. When it comes to renewable diesel, we have used brown grease to produce renewable diesel at 100% conversion from brown grease and 93% plus selectivity to diesel-like hydrocarbons. And we've done so through hundreds of hours on stream. So this is work funded by the US Department of Energy, and it proves that our technology can be tested for a long period of time to give these very promising results. And lastly, we have also produced sustainable aviation fuel, also in 100% conversion from brown grease, and in contrast with current technology that utilizes a multi-step process to go from the feedstock, in this case brown grease, to SAF, we have been able to do this in a single step. However, I'll be the first to admit that we are currently still working on this, and we are focused on adjusting the selectivity of our catalyst to afford all the components of aviation fuel, which you can see on the left side of this graph, in the right proportion. So that's easier said than done, and that is the work that we're doing right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eduardo. Eduardo did mention the Kentucky SAF Coalition. This is a partnership of airlines, air cargo carriers, fuel producers, industry, and more. They've come together to kind of explore how Kentucky can play a leading role in the future of sustainable aviation fuel, and they have funded WSP to look more into this and see, where Kentucky stands today, where we can go in the future, and I'm excited to have Auden here to tell us a little bit more about their study and their work with the Kentucky SAF Coalition.
All right, thank you. I think I have a presentation. There we go. So Auden Kaler with WSP. First, I'd just like to thank one of our sponsors here from Cincinnati Northern Kentucky Airport, Melissa and Larissa. I think you're back there. Yeah, there they are in the center. So really, this has been an effort through utilizing a lot of the work that Eduardo and a lot of other universities throughout the country are doing, a lot of development in the industry, to look at specific opportunities or feasibility for bringing SAF into Kentucky and making it not only an intermediate use for immediate use at some of the airports here based on customer requirements. And customers here are talking about cargo carriers, commercial carriers, people using jet fuel, but really looking at those longer term opportunities to produce SAF here in Kentucky using feedstock based locally to really support local economic development. I'm going to be using the term alternative aviation fuel kind of interchangeably with SAF. It's just we're using a more technology agnostic term here compared to Eduardo, who is focused in on specific technologies. But essentially, it's the same term. Don't want to confuse you too much on all the jargon I'm going to be going through, but I'll keep it simple and to alternative fuels for this presentation. So going back to Eduardo's point about overall demand, this is a little bit more of a subset of overall Kentucky demand. So we're looking at the 5 primary commercial airports. From total jet fuel demand of around 609 million gallons today, we're anticipating close to 1 billion by 2050. If we include the total state, we're already hitting 1.2 billion by 2030. A lot of different scenarios in how we can bring alternative fuel to the state and what percentage blends are possible from the technology perspective, but also on what's available as far as a supply and economic perspective. And a lot of our work is really focused on some of those policies, both at the federal level and the state level, to help encourage the use of sustainable aviation fuel. So blends, when we're looking at 2030, 1% blend would be about 7 million gallons, up to a 50% blend in 2050 of close to 493 million gallons. So it sounds like big volumes, but put it in perspective, a bushel of soy can produce roughly equivalent of 1.5 gallons of alternative fuel. Corn, about 2.7 gallons, and if we're looking at used cooking oil or some of those byproducts, waste products, we're almost to a 1-to-1 ratio there. Kentucky has a very interesting position as far as conventional jet fuel and refined product supply. In general, it's largely disconnected from the major refining centers in the Gulf Coast and East Coast. There's definitely constraints as far as connectivity to some of those major pipelines. Most of the supply tends to come from 2 primary sources, the Marathon-Catlettsburg refinery located on the Ohio River, and then the Lima refinery in Ohio that has a small diameter pipeline that provides into Cincinnati. But overall, most of the product is moving by barge down the Ohio River, as Eduardo mentioned, and there's also some inter movements with truck. So we see a lot of barge to terminal to truck to airports. When we look at where the production is currently, you can see it's also kind of centered around the Gulf Coast. The blue circles indicate existing production. The red circles here are planned or future production. So really nothing in Kentucky at the moment, but looking for those opportunities. You can see that a lot of red circles are popping up in some states outside of the main refining centers, and we'll talk about some of those incentives that are made available to help promote the production of alternative fuel in some of those markets. Specific to Kentucky, I'm going to take Eduardo's findings on some of those primary feedstocks, overlay that with the airports and demand for aviation fuel. And we can see that there's a really good synergies there. So where we see the corn, soybean, animal fats, the greases, the production is really focused around where those airports are and where that demand is. As Eduardo mentioned, the Ohio River serves as a great place for great impetus for bringing barge movements, both feedstocks and produced alternative fuels, to bring it into the existing terminals that are already supplying these airports with conventional jet. When we look at Kentucky, in addition to some of those waterborne movements, you can see there's synergies with the Mississippi River as well, so some opportunities maybe in the future to export both feedstocks and potentially production from the state to other markets. But really, it's all integrated along that river system and also supplemented by a really essentially developed and built out rail system. And this really serves as a great pathway for moving, again, a lot of the feedstocks and produced products. Most of the ethanol and biodiesel today is moved by rail, so there's already the infrastructure out there to support the movement and use of alternative fuels by rail. Now, getting into the primary components here is policies and incentives. So I'm going to start with federal and then get into state. So there's been over $4 billion in federal funding to support research, development, and production, including alternative fuel-specific production, specifically the FAST SAF grant program, which brought in $300 million over 33 projects, just focused on SAF production. We also have the Federal Renewable Fuel Standard. That has been the primary federal program supporting all biofuels for the last few decades, and really been pushed to extend to alternative fuels for aviation. And finally, the IRA 45Z. So this is kind of a transition from the 40B program, for any of you familiar with these incentives. But while it reduced the amount available for SAF from $1.75 maximum to $1, it did extend the timeline from 2027 to 2029. And this is critical for investors. They need to see that these incentives will be in place for longer term to support these investments in alternative fuel production. So we're really optimistic that given the bipartisan nature in today's environment in DC, that it was able to get through with that support. At the state level, it's really a hodgepodge of activities and incentives. Most of the original backing for alternative fuels was the West Coast. You have low carbon fuel standards in California, Oregon, Washington, that really supported some of the initial growth of production for alternative fuels. That's expanded, and now we're seeing a lot more interest in tax incentives or tax credits. These tax credits, as you can see on the map, in Minnesota, Nebraska, Illinois, and potentially soon Iowa, are looking at a different pathways and looking at essentially the production within the state rather than the use and reduction necessarily in emissions. The policies incentives really focus on those combination of production and blending incentives. So you can see here that it goes throughout the value chain. If you start from the left on that diagram with project development, there are states like Colorado who are making tax credits available at that stage of the pathway, all the way through Illinois, who is incentivizing the use of alternative fuels. But most of the trends today have really been in production and refining. So we've seen, again, those tax credits in Minnesota, Washington, Nebraska, and Iowa, really promoting domestic production and refining of alternative fuels. They're also stackable, and this is important when we look at the pricing, that you can stack both federal and state incentives to diminish that gap or variance between the price of conventional jet and the price of alternative aviation fuel. Kentucky House Bill 775 did commit to further research and developments to really continue that work and build up that alternative fuels policy. So what does this look like in practice? This is an example of some infrastructure and supply chain investments that we're looking at. We evaluated over 50 terminals and tanks throughout the state, and also some greenfield sites where there's potential for building new facilities. These can range from $5 million tank conversion expansion to $85 million investment in new sites and infrastructure, specifically water and rail. So a lot of incentives to build and develop these facilities, but also utilize facilities that might not be maximized today. So a lot of maybe half-used storage facilities or underutilized storage facilities where there really is an opportunity to both store and blend alternative fuel with conventional fuel. And as Eduardo mentioned, that there are restrictions on how much you can blend that we're looking to tie to when we look at these investments. So this is the big one, the price differential. For airlines, the most critical factor is what's that difference between that blue bar, which is the jet fuel price, and that green bar, which is the alternative fuel price. This is from a couple months ago, a contract cost of about $5.04 per gallon for alternative fuel versus conventional fuel of $2.43. Those first two bars represent the federal incentives, and that can range, again, depending on the production methods and the feedstocks. They can qualify for different levels of incentives, but generally you're going to see that being in the range of $1.50 to $2.50. So it can actually get you to parity, but what we're really looking for is making up that gap. You can see the LCFS, or the low carbon fuel standard, in the West Coast makes up a big chunk of that, but still has that little red portion of about 65 cents. So what we've seen in a lot of those state incentives is a range between 50 cents, $2.50 a gallon to meet that difference. We are optimistic though, so as production increases, we're seeing those costs come down. We're seeing closer parity in those prices. What would have been $7 maybe a year ago is now $5, and we continue to see that price dropping. So in our more optimistic scenario, we see actually a potential for negative variances where sustainable aviation fuel is actually priced lower than conventional jet. But on the other side, if all those incentives were removed, we would see pretty major difference or discrepancy between the two. And finally, the production distribution. So he's looking at the midterm and long term, looking for those opportunities in Kentucky. Overall, the industry, 5 billion gallons per year, generates 42.4 billion in economic activity. It's an established sector within the U.S., 107,000 jobs. A study done by University of Tennessee looked at 3 facilities in Central Appalachia and a Fisher-Trope biorefinery technique. They came up with costs of around $1.6 billion to produce those 3 facilities, including feedstock supply, with an economic benefit over $2.2 billion. So we are incorporating all of this into our study and findings that we're pretty much finalizing this month. So we're anxious and excited to share that with a broader audience. But really, at the end of the day, Kentucky is looking like a great opportunity for investment in sustainable aviation fuels.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alden. So just last month, the One World Alliance, representing 15 airports in the world, launched a SAF investment fund focusing on developing and commercializing sustainable aviation fuel. And like Alden said, SAF is in limited supply, and that's contributing to higher costs, but demand is continuing to rise, and like Alden said, Kentucky is well positioned to play a role. However, Kentucky isn't just home to traditional biofuel waste streams, and we're actually home to a pretty interesting one, and that is stillage, or the byproduct of the distilling industry, which actually has led Kentucky to have a really interesting opportunity. And Grisson, based in Scotland, has invested for the first time in the U.S. and is now calling Kentucky home, so we're really excited to have Matt Yarger on our panel today to talk about this investment and about Grissom Renewable.
Appreciate it, Haley. Hi, everybody. Good morning. My name is Matt Yarger. I'm the general manager for Grissom Renewable Energy. In the U.S., Grissom is a clean energy company with deep roots in Scotland and growing right here in Kentucky, where the bourbon industry as well as agriculture can support this alternative energy option. So Grissom was founded more than a decade ago, like I said, in Scotland, really solving a challenge that we know well here in Kentucky, which is what do you do with the waste after producing bourbon, or in this case, Scotch whiskey? Instead of treating it as waste, Grissom worked on a technology to convert to renewable natural gas and biofertilizer, and created this circular model that not only would provide power back to the distilleries, but as we've grown, also provided heat or fuel in the form of heating the homes across all of Scotland. So here in Kentucky, we're planning to build that same circular model, starting with our plant in Lebanon, Marion County. We take the leftover from the still, just convert that to renewable natural gas, biofertilizer that replace, and then renewable natural gas that displaces fossil fuels. Our mission is not only to kind of replicate what was done in Scotland in terms of using the industrial waste residues and converting that into energy, but also doing it just like in Scotland and being supporting the communities as well as being a good steward in those communities. So none of that, this would work without those partnerships. So of course the distilleries, but also the farmers who would use our local farms that would use the rich fertilizers that's a byproduct, local suppliers and construction firms that are all building jobs here, keeping the dollars here in Kentucky, and then strengthening the link between the bourbon barrel and the family farm. So our plant in Marion County is just the start. Our long-term vision is a network where it makes sense of these closed-loop facilities across rural communities within bourbon country, each one turning the local waste into clean fuel, fertilizer, and community benefits. I feel that this isn't just an energy project, but it's also an economic development story that keeps Kentucky heritage industries, bourbon, agriculture, and sets it up for next generations. Oops. Sorry. So who is Grissom? So we're a company that believes that both heritage and innovation belong together, that we're proving that bourbon, sustainable farming, and renewable energy can thrive in one circular model right here in Kentucky.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Matt. It's a really fascinating story. I did want to ask you one question about that closed loop model. Your whiskey waste to RNG to farm fertilizer to grain back into bourbon. It is a very fascinating closed loop model. And what does that exactly mean for Kentucky's circular economy?
Yeah, so the process all involves local sources. So You start with the local sources of waste. Our plants are built close proximity to distilleries. After you strip the methane out, that goes into the local pipeline. What's left behind is a nutrient-rich fertilizer with nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus that can be reapplied to the local farmlands. Preferably, even in some cases, we partnered with local farms that provide grains back to distilleries. So that fertilizer is applied on the cereals, which go then back into the production of bourbon and then continues, the story continues.
Thank you. For our final presentation, we'll look at how a major industrial facility has rethinked their operations to reduce waste and maximize resource efficiency. The paper milling industry is a large load user and has really complex byproducts. And rather than viewing those products as a challenge, Domtar has been a leader in this forward-thinking, improving operational sustainability. And they've been just a true leader in this space. So I'm really excited to have Derek Smith from Domtar. They have a mill in Hawesville, and he's going to talk a little bit about their operations, their combined heat and power facility there. So if everybody can turn their attention to Derek.
Good morning, and thanks for having me. My name is Derek Smith. I'm the environmental manager at Domtar's Hawesville mill. Today, I'll be sharing how our pulp and paper mill uses renewable fuels to power its operation, generate electricity, and even sequester CO2 back into our product. Paper mills are energy intensive. For us, that's both a major cost and a sustainability challenge. But unlike other industries, we have access to renewable fuels right inside our process. Black liquor and scrap wood, and that's what I'll be focusing on today. This diagram shows the big picture. Trees take in CO2. We use wood to make pulp and paper. We recover byproducts and use them as renewable fuels. Some of the CO2 we emit, we're able to capture and sequester into our product. And this process starts and ends with sustainable forestry. Over the next few slides, I'll walk you through each step in a little more detail. The two renewable fuels that we use are black liquor and scrap wood. Black liquor is a byproduct of the pulping process and contains lignin, a sticky, gooey polymer that naturally binds wood fibers together, and spent cooking chemicals. Instead of being wasted, we concentrate black liquor and burn it in our recovery boilers. This produces steam for the mill and recycles cooking chemicals back into our process. Scrap wood includes bark, trimmings from the lumber industry, and also wood chips that are not suitable for pulping. When we burn scrap wood, it produces additional steam for the mill and ensures minimal waste from our feedstocks. Purchasing scrap wood is a financial benefit to our lumber mills and chip suppliers, as otherwise they would have to dispose of this product as waste. Together, these two fuels form the backbone of our energy production program. This slide shows a breakdown of the fuels we use as shown in percent of total heat input. Black liquor is the biggest contributor, followed by scrap wood. We do use natural gas as a supplemental fuel, but the renewable fuels make up the mainstay of the fuels we use. Very small percentage is transportational fuels of gas, diesel, and propane for transportation and localized heating, but we no longer use coal or pet coke or fuel oil, which was common in paper mills of the past. Our boilers produce high pressure steam, which is sent to a power turbine to generate electricity. We currently generate about 50% of the electricity we use on site. Steam exiting the turbine is usable low pressure steam, which is sent to various processes in the mill and to the paper machines for heating and drying. When we use these fuels, this cogeneration setup for both process steam and electricity is more efficient than having separate systems. Another unique part of the Kraft paper mill and also our mill is CO2 from our lime kiln is used in the production of precipitated calcium carbonate, or PCC. PCC is a filler ingredient for paper that improves brightness and print quality. So essentially, we're locking CO2 from our process into the paper itself. Benefits of using renewable fuels are both environmental and economic. Environmentally, using black liquor and scrap wood reduces our need for fossil fuels. These fuels are also considered biogenic because they're part of the natural carbon cycle. And plus, being able to capture CO2 from our lime kiln and store it in PCC and then the paper itself is very good from a sustainability standpoint. On the economic and operational side, using renewable fuels saves us costs. We're not having to purchase additional natural gas or electricity. We're using the products we already have to generate those. Also, the Kraft pulping cycle, the recovery boilers are able to recycle these pulping chemicals over and over again, reducing our need to buy virgin feedstocks. So overall, using renewable fuels has led to lower costs, self-sufficiency, and better efficiency. That was short, but that concludes my presentation for today. I'm happy to take any questions.
Amazing. Okay, thank you so much, Derek. Like I said, Domtar has really been a leader in environmental stewardship in the paper milling industry, and that starts well before generation. I'd love to tell you, I'd love to ask you if you could tell us a little bit more about your forest management practices and how they tie into your overall environmental stewardship goals.
Sure. On the pulp and paper side, we primarily buy wood, but we do manage some forest in the U.S. and Canada. And first of all, we have to be really respectful to the communities. A lot of these communities in Canada especially were traditionally home of many indigenous people, so we have to be respectful of that. And all of the forests that we manage are third-party certified to several international standards. And then all the wood that comes into all of Domtar's mill is traced, tracked, and third-party certified.
Amazing. Okay, we're going to go ahead and open it up to some audience questions. So don't forget that you guys can go into the app and enter some questions. We do have a few already in there. And this one's about SAF. And the audience would like to know if this fuel burns cleaner than conventional from an air quality standpoint. And what is the difference in the chemical makeup of the outputs?
I can start with an answer from non-technical perspective, but in general, we are seeing efficiency improvements with the use of SAF. So there is a slight reduction in fuel use or consumption when we put out 100% use of SAF in some of those commercial flights. That's only been on a test or pilot basis. If you're flying today, it's probably the most you're seeing in your plane is probably like 1% or 2% at most in some of the commercial airports. So there is an efficiency improvement there, and I think from an availability perspective, that's going to be dependent on where you are in the country.
Do you have anything to add, Eduardo?
Yeah, you're probably going to regret having invited a chemist here, but it is true that aviation fuel is a much more complex fuel than, say, diesel. Diesel is made out of just a single type of hydrocarbons, straight chain. Aviation fuel would have these branched hydrocarbons, cyclic hydrocarbons, aromatics, and they're all important because they fulfill very specific and important roles in aircraft. Aromatics, for instance, swell the seals. And so without that, there will be leaks. You have no fuel, bad. And so most SAF production technology focuses on some types of hydrocarbons that would produce those linear hydrocarbons or those branch hydrocarbons. No cycles, no aromatics. And so it is important to just remember that most technologies would produce blend stock, stuff that has only some types of hydrocarbons that they would need to be mixed in the right proportion, et cetera. So that ties feedstock to conversion process, to blending, and then obviously everything that is related to testing and certification and all those good things.
Yeah, the audience is also interested in the emission reductions and how can we truly know that SAF is a sustainable option for aviation?
Yes, there's a vast array of studies on this. I am more familiar with diesel emissions. It is similar in the sense that they would compare the emissions from fossil diesel and green or renewable diesel. These studies are performed by producers like Neste. Neste is the largest green diesel producer in the world. They perform their own studies, academic studies, and even regulatory agencies would implement studies to make this very comparison. So the conclusion and the consensus is that renewable fuels do reduce emissions, not only carbon emissions, but other emissions like nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides, particulate matter, et cetera. So that's kind of like the, hopefully the Cliff Notes answer to that.
Perfect. No, that's very helpful. Matt, the audience is really interested in knowing when is the timeline for the opening of this plant in Marion County?
Yeah, so we were hoping that it would be early 2026, but we all experienced quite a bit of rain that in the early parts of this year, as everybody knows. So it did delay things, but we're planning on starting commissioning mid-2026 and likely go gas to grid towards the later end of the year. But I can report that there are tank bases that are being poured, and we're actually starting to see more than just the groundwork at the site, so that's nice. And so we should see a lot of productivity between now and the end of the year.
I don't know if you would be able to answer this, Auden, but or go into much detail, but they want to know, is SAF the only way to decarbonize aviation? And what is the future for hydrogen or electric flights like?
That's a great question, and we're actually doing that exact study for some of the airports on the West Coast. Airbus was pushing hydrogen aircraft for a while. They've backed off on some of that initiative. They're looking at Atlanta and San Francisco running hydrogen flights to and from the airports. There's a few challenges right now, and obviously electric aviation is probably getting a little bit more attention than hydrogen. Obviously battery size, battery weight can restrict the range for flights. But we have seen that on shorter flights or smaller aircraft, some interest in development and actually some deployed technology for batteries in that frame. But when we look at kind of full-scale development for batteries for long-haul flights, that's generally in the 20 to 30-year range, assuming the battery technology keeps improving as it has been over the last 2 decades. When we look at hydrogen, it all comes down to economics, and the price of hydrogen is really kind of a deterrent at the moment. We're really aiming for $1 per kilogram at some point within the next 10 or 20 years, which would send kind of a signal to the market that there is an opportunity there for investment in supporting infrastructure and also aircraft. But the big thing for aviation is the length of time it takes to transition the fleet is much longer than what we see with the vehicle fleet. Aircraft are out there for 20, 30 years plus. So when we talk about that transition, we're really talking about a 50-year time horizon. But SAF can provide that kind of intermediate transition to help reduce greenhouse gases now, help use domestic feedstocks in production, and gradually get us to that state where we can make that full conversion to other technology.
Okay, thank you. Derek, they're very interested in the third-party certification process. Are you able to tell us any more about that and about the wood products that you collect as part of your forest management program?
Not right now. Don Tar does have a lot of resources available to explain that. However, that's really not my area of expertise, so I don't really want to misspeak on that.
Okay, yeah, I know we were talking earlier to someone else, to Sunny Fleming. She seemed very interested in this topic. We'll hear from her later today. So I think if you're interested in talking about forest certifications, she's a great resource. She was saying that the forest certifications that you guys utilize are gold standard. So so that's something that maybe we could talk about at a later time. And then they want to know that given the decline in the bourbon market lately, Matt, how is this affecting RNG development?
Yeah, well, we're, I guess, grateful to be, our parent company is a 6th generation whiskey manufacturer. They're in it for the long term. So, and that was stated here with the level of investment that was made to Kentucky. I think that in terms of the specific site in Lebanon, we have plenty of feedstock for that site. There was earlier in the year, maybe some of the discussions have slowed down a bit, but they're starting to pick up in terms of additional sites. So I think we're going to be fine. It's a secular, like most industries, but there'll always be these challenges with what do you do with the waste, and we'll be there. And we're, like I said, we're in it for the long haul.
Okay, we've got another SAF question. How do you balance the food versus fuel debate with SAF, dipping into animal food stock stillage and human food stock, corn and soy?
That's a great question. Thank you, because it's one of the most important dilemmas that we deal with, food versus fuel. You obviously don't want to disrupt the food supply if you divert corn, soybean, et cetera, from food. It raises prices. It's just not a great idea. There are solutions, though. I mentioned one, focusing on waste. Streams like yellow grease or used cooking oil, brown grease, stuff that is right now landfilled, incinerated, unvalorized. You could use that. Granted, the volumes would be limited. And so there are other, I'm not an agronomist, sorry, there's probably one in the room, but there are other agronomical solutions to this. Cover crops, for instance. So cover crops are, as the name implies, crops that could be planted in between growing, say, soybeans or other edible crops. They have agronomical benefits in the sense that they replenish the soil. They are inedible, and then it can be harvested and put to use. And so there are just an incredible amount of land, farmland, that could benefit from implementing these type of crops. The soil would benefit. There would be an economic benefit since farmers would have like an additional revenue stream. We do not disrupt, but actually support the food supply. So there are solutions to avoid the food versus fuel dilemma.
Yeah, just for my own curiosity as well, can you talk a little bit about solid waste from municipalities as well as maybe waste from wastewater treatment plants and how that can tie into sustainable aviation fuel? And feel free to jump in too as well if you're interested.
Well, I'll get us started, and then if Auden has like something else, by all means. Yes, municipal solid waste is being used. There are projects ongoing at the University of Kentucky. I am not directly involved, but the Biosystems and Ag Engineering Department has a SAF project where they focus particularly on municipal solid waste. So that is a potential source of SAF. The technology is more nascent, so it's more in R&D stage right now as opposed to commercial. In terms of wastewater treatment, the best example that I can mention is brown grease. So all the fats, oils, and greases that go down the drain, they can be either intercepted through devices called grease traps. They're collected, and so that's a very good feedstock. It not only provides a starting material for SAP, but it also avoids many, many problems like fat bergs. If you want to be grossed out, just look at it online. It's a very, very big problem for particularly cities with old sewer systems, like London, for instance. They can clog the sewer system, and it takes millions, and it's very disruptive to clean those out. So if that can be kind of like prevented and provide a feedstock for SAP production, great. Otherwise, once that things already reach the wastewater treatment facility, right now that brown grease, that fog stream is recovered and then landfilled. So once again, if we can recover that, it would reduce fees that wastewater treatment plants have to pay in order to landfill this material. It provides another revenue stream. It's kind of like a win-win-win.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm not sure what this question is, but maybe you do. What about corn from wastewater treatment plants? If anybody wants to clarify that question, feel free to do that.
Maybe I'm just guessing.
Yeah,
I'm just guessing. But the source of the brown grease that we utilize is, you can also look it up, I'm not making it up, it's called Greasezilla. This is a system that can be deployed to wastewater treatment plants, and it separates the effluent in 3 different streams. One is pasteurized water, the other is brown grease, and the third, which is what the corn made me think of, is called batter. So all the food crud and other crud is basically concentrated, and this batter can be then used to generate, say, natural gas through an anaerobic digestion process. So that's the only thing that I can think of like how these things would mesh.
I think one addition to that last question and the prior question was there's also an economic component to this. So when we look at all these different feedstocks and production methods, you can essentially expand that credit to the maximum of $1 at the federal level. So when we look at pathways that may generate higher carbon intensity, those do not get to that full $1 credit. So those are under. So it's a tiered basis based on those greenhouse gas emissions. So when we talk about even the food versus fuel debate, some of that is important to consider as some of those soy or corn-based biofuels will not score as highly or reduce carbon intensity as much, so will not be able to receive that full federal credit. And we also see similar structures at the state level for many of the credits out there.
Yeah, that's definitely an important part of the conversation. Matt, we do have another question for you. We do know that stillage or bourbon byproducts are often used as cattle feed, and so they're interested in knowing how you manage that and how that is impacting the agricultural
Yeah, that's actually a very good question.
Yeah.
So first, a lot of the cattle feed, the process to produce cattle feed is a highly energy-intensive process for the distilleries. So they require immense amount of energy to get into a form to then feed animals. We look at ourselves as maybe part of that solution. Some of our feedstock agreements are not directly competing, some are. But the idea is that we're also partnering in agriculture with agricultural partners to provide the fertilizer that could go on grasses that could then also be used as animal feed as well, and hopefully produce more, should produce more grass than an unfertilized field, things like that. I mean, there are other options, but it's more about like that partnership. And look, I've only been in the industry since January, but I've been in chemical processing and operations roles. And I can say I know a lot more about this stuff, and there's a lot to go around. So I think it is something to be considered for sure.
All right, thank you so much. And we are going to go ahead and roll into break because we're not seeing any more questions from the audience. I do want to give a huge shout out. Oh, we do have an audience question. We got a hand raised. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I would start by saying that anything that is fog, what I mentioned, fats, oils, and greases, used cooking oil, brown grease, corn oil, soybean oil, that's biomass. So we may have like a definition correction there. It is biomass. You may be talking about lignocellulosic biomass, and that's fair. It's more abundant, so that's important, but I think we would not fight over the fact that the technology is much less developed. Fog conversion to SAF is entirely commercial. It's happening right now. We are developing a different pathway. In terms of chicken fat, great point. That's also fog. So mainly fatty acids, triglycerides. It would be amenable for conversion to renewable diesel or SAF through this technology, either current existing hydrotreating technology or the alternative technology that we are developing. So yeah, I think we speak to those feedstocks, but for the audience in general, I would just really emphasize the following point. Feedstock, conversion technology, and product are all related. People can also convert CO2 and renewable hydrogen into SAF, looking to e-fuels. That exists, it's possible. Whether that is commercial, the technology is not there yet. So more R&D would be required, and the same thing applies to all other different feedstocks, like lignocellulosics, for instance. They're at a different stage in their development.
All right, thank you. Do we have any more audience questions without the app? Okay, perfect. All right, we are going to roll into break. I'd love if you guys could give a round of applause to our panelists. Yes. Thank you all for joining us. I do want to give a big shout out to Deloitte. They are sponsoring this break, and we will be rejoining at 11 o'clock for our Partnerships to Build Stronger Communities panel. So please be back in your seat at 11 for that panel.